Okay, hello everybody. This presentation is an introduction presentation to Scrum. Scrum is Agile process for software development, and it's an iterative and incremental process. Before I move forward, I wanted to see how many people are familiar with Scrum. If you can raise your hands. Okay, we have 3, 4, 5. And how many of you are actually using it on a regular basis? Okay. That's going to help me out, maybe skip faster over some things or have you guys feel free to join the discussion and share some experiences. Just brief introduction for me. I was born in '69, former Yugoslavia, so English is not my first language. Married, 3 kids. I've been in software development for over 20 years. I'm also Agile coach and project manager, and my background is in electrical engineering. I'm also certified Scrum Master and Product Owner. One interesting thing here, I'm mentioning ISO 9000, not that I'm a big fan of it, but we successfully used Scrum to do the ISO certification on the software development and consulting company. I'm also a big fan of open source software. Initiated Ubuntu groups back in former Yugoslavia. We are still pushing that effort over there and promoting open source. Also big fan of retro computing, collecting all computers kind of as I was growing up, 8-bit computers, 16-bit computers, so just to give you a little flavor. So what the Scrum term is. The Scrum term is coming from British rugby, sport that I'm not familiar very much with, but it's similar to American football. That's another sport I'm not very familiar with. But the interesting thing is that this analogy was used in some production, process analysis, and later on in Scrum for the Scrum or software development process. But the point in this Scrum is the way how they continue the game after the break. And one of the players, which is kind of funny to me, is the guy who is throwing the ball between the 2 teams. But the 2 teams are getting into this interlocked group position, and they're kind of, positioned against each other. And the whole team as a one is trying to push as hard as they can to move a little bit forward, push the other team, and then using their hands, I guess, get the ball back so they get a hold of the ball. The analogy here is that in the Agile development, especially Scrum, we use the team as a whole to try to do this incremental progress or achieve the goals that are defined for that incremental progress. I also put this picture on the right bottom corner that's kind of more, I guess, a closer analogy to the software development, because it gets dirty. In 100 words, it's an agile process that allows us to focus on delivering the highest business value in the shortest amount of time. It also allows us to continuously verify or inspect the actual product that we work on. And it's important to say that in Scrum, a team is allowed to self-organize, or actually encouraged to self-organize, in order to find the best way to deliver the goals. The last thing is that in every iteration, which can be 2 weeks to up to a month, anybody can really see a working software or deliverable that's potentially shippable product. Traditional approach is something that most of us are either familiar from books or working for a company or working with management in our company or somebody else's company, but typically it's that gated or relay race type of approach where everybody has to work on requirements, or specific people work on requirements, and then they pass them to the design team, and then design team comes up with design or architecture or whatever they think is needed, then they throw that at coders, and coders are writing code, goes to testing, and then goes to whatever. This almost never works. And even if in the companies that are using this approach, it does not work that way. They formally maybe keep track of it, and they have project managers and Gantt charts and all that, but in theory, they always have going back to requirements or doing change or going back to the design. So it's a kind of something that we would like to have in simple way of thinking about any kind of process of product development, but it's not, especially in the software engineering, what's happening. This was noted even early, in mid-80s. I mean, this is an example, that's talking about product development, and there was one of these references to rugby when they said that the traditional approach to product development does not work. It actually cannot, or does not serve our needs for competitive requirements or competitive need to be flexible and able to change requirements quickly and compete with the competitors. As far as the software development goes, there are various agile methodologies, and I encourage everybody to Google that and check what the methods are. Scrum is one of the agile methods that actually picked up really, really well. So a lot of companies are doing it. So it became a decent skill to have, not only on your CV, but even if you're changing companies or knowing Scrum will really help you get working with that other team. Put some names here that are Ken Schwaber, Mike Beadle, Mike Hohn. Mike Hohn is actually one of my favorite, maybe out of these, but might be the reason because some of the books I like are coming from him, are maybe more recent than the other ones. But I encourage you to check them out. It's used in various companies, big and small. It's even used by companies that are not software developers. It's been used for commercial software, in-house development, pretty much everything you can, came up, or outsourcing. That's something I had experience with. It's been used to plan weddings. It's been used in churches. So, I mean, you can use it for various things. Main characteristics, there's some repetition because I want you guys to kind of maybe remember these most important things, is that the team is a self-organizing team. The product or software is being advanced in these fixed time slots that are called sprints or iterations. The requirements are captured in an item list. In Scrum terminology, it's called product backlog. The next very important thing to know is that Scrum does not require any specific engineering practices. It actually lets the team to choose which practices they want to utilize in order to provide the best value. Scrum does provide a set of simple rules to create the agile environment, and it's one of the agile processes. As far as agile processes, and I encourage everybody to check agilemanifesto.org website, but what's kind of taken here is the look at the statement of values that's common for all agile processes. So whenever we deal with software engineering, you have people or individuals, you have processes and tools. So in any agile environment, we want to give we value more people and their interactions than the actual processes as tools. The same comes for the artifacts. If we are looking at the software development, then the working software has more value to us than comprehensive documentation. If we are talking about interactions with the clients or customers, then the collaboration with the clients has more value than the actual contract negotiation. Anytime in the middle of the project, if you start reading the contract, that means that the project is in trouble. So you have to keep that collaboration with the customer all the way. Responding to change over following the plan. The very important thing here is that this does not mean that we do not value the things on the right. They are actually very important. It's just the thing that things on the left we value more. So I was recently doing a consulting for the US company that's outsourcing their software development to Eastern Europe. And I talked to the Scrum Master over there over the phone, and he told me, I said, can you give me the architecture of your solution so that I can understand what's going on? Because they anticipate using several iPads, I mean thousands, talking to the server on the Amazon cloud. I'm like, give me the architectures. They said, we don't have any documentation. I'm like, how? He said, we are agile. So that's not a good sign. That's not a good sign. Incidentally, they were able to produce very good documentation in a very short period of time. That's another thing, you know. But the thing is that they had a really bad, you know, misunderstanding of the things, in a sense that deliverable is not only the working software. This is one of the simpler pictures, you know. I took it from Wikipedia. This is the process in a nutshell. So on the left side, we have a list of our requirements or list of the features that we want to implement. Typically in the Scrum world, people use user stories to capture requirements. So you can think of these items in the backlog of user stories. I'll look at user stories later, so I'll give you little details if you're not familiar with the term. But basically, these are kind of a little bit bigger items that you need to do. And then there is a person responsible for backlog. The role is called product owner. And he sorts the backlog in a priority before every sprint. And then he sits down and talks to the team and says, OK, this is what we need to do. These top things are my highest priority. What can you do? They say, we think we can do the thing 1, 2, and 4. Why not 1, 2, and 3? They say, well, maybe 4 is one that more relates to things 1 and 2, so it makes more sense to us to do it. And then he says, OK. So they bring it down. They break down these features or requirements that they selected for the sprint into something that's called sprint backlog, which is now this breaking down the backlog items means like we have now to identify all the tasks that need to be done in this period. In this case, 30 days, but it can be 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then the team commits to these tasks or these items that they're going to finish it. And they get into the sprint, which is 30 days in this picture, and they say, don't interrupt us, don't bother us, don't force us to do any PowerPoint presentations or anything. We want to work on this. And they go through these daily iterations, which are called daily scrums, and all they require is that everybody reports to everybody else in the team what they have been doing on. And after 30 days, they need to deliver. They have a little sprint review meeting, and they have to deliver something that's potentially shippable product. So it's not just me implementing certain feature, but that thing is not tested or that thing is not working for every case. It actually has to get to the point that it's potentially shippable. And then we all decide, are we going to release it or we're going to wait another sprint to enhance the product a little more. A good example for that would be, let's say if we are implementing printing in some application and we have print preview and actual print, and for some reason in the current sprint we only have enough time to do print preview. So we may get to the point that we do have potentially shippable product, meaning like the print preview works perfectly, but we may say there is no use of releasing a product that has print preview but does not have a print function. So just to look at the sprint, all these iterations are called sprint. This is more like terminology. It's analog to other agile methodologies. Typical duration is 2 to 4 weeks. In recent years, a lot of people are proposing to go towards 2 weeks instead of 4 weeks. It again depends on a lot of parameters. But the idea is that you keep that time slot fixed. So you don't change it between sprints. So this sprint we're going to do 1 month. This sprint we're going to do 2 weeks. No, you should kind of keep it constant because it gives you the good rhythm and everybody gets used to it. And they also get used to the length of the meetings and length of the planning and all of that. During the sprint, the product is designed, coded, and tested. So this is one of the pictures that somewhat relates to that waterfall picture. So we have requirements, design, code, and test. And this is the look of one iteration or one sprint. And this diagram at the bottom is showing us that activity on these disciplines like requirements, design, and code are actually taking place throughout the whole sprint. Maybe requirements a little bit more in the beginning, maybe testing a little bit more towards the end, but basically the whole sprint, the whole team is working on all these activities. This is something that I learned and experienced even before I ever heard of Scrum. That's what's really happening in real life. The other important thing that we already mentioned is that during the sprint there are no changes. So the responsibility of the team is to commit that they're going to do something. But then we really have to give them best possible environment to do that. So we don't want to kind of say, oh, we have an important visit. I mean, sometimes you have to do that, but or you have to stop doing that and do something for me, or do this, that's not going to work. You have to really give them an environment when they can do what they committed to. The thing that's related to this is that also this sprint duration that we touched earlier, you should plan your length or duration of these sprints depending on how long can you keep the change out of the whole development process. So if you cannot sustain that your team is working on something the full month without interrupting them or navigating team left or right, then you have to have short sprints. The other things that are not mentioned here but are affecting this is it also depends on what kind of technology you are using and what kind of a level of testing is required. So there are certain things that you cannot do in 2 weeks, and then going towards the shorter sprints requires also better or more activity on the product owner side, because they have to prepare the backlog in a way that these features or requirements are as such, or the granularity of them is as such that it can be done in 2 weeks. Let us quickly go through the framework. So there are 3 big things: roles, ceremonies or meetings, and artifacts. Roles, there is product owner, Scrum Master, and team. So product owner, that's probably one of the most important roles, of course, in Scrum, but one of the weirdest one, and I'll try to explain why. Let us look at the responsibilities here. He's the one who defines, or she defines the features of the product. He or she decides on the release date and content. They're responsible for bringing the highest value in every iteration. They're responsible for the priority of the features in the backlog. They're responsible to adjust this priority and review the backlog after every sprint or before every sprint. And they're also responsible for accepting or rejecting work. So they're responsible for a lot of things. The reason I'm saying that's the weirdest role is that sometimes product owner can be a member of the team. Let's say if we're talking about development company, you can have a team that's developing certain software, and then it can be a member of that company. It can be a person that's outside of the company, but let's say also in IT world. Cases are, for example, IBM is outsourcing something to a company in India, and they have a product owner who is here in Austin, and they have a team who has a Scrum Master and the team overseas. You have to work, if you're within the company, that's the person who has the most communication with the clients or the future users of the software. Scrum Master. Scrum Master is the person who is, it's very important to say, he's the member of the team. And you can think of him or her as a person who is responsible basically for 2 things. One is to help everybody to remove any obstacles that may arise, or to shield the team from these external interferences. Other thing, that's the person that's responsible to make sure everybody, is doing what they're supposed to do, and there is a good cooperation between all the roles. The Scrum values are, being enacted and things like that. But these 2 things, you can think of that person as a bulldozer who is like waiting, is there anything in anybody's way? Oh, you don't know how to use that driver or something? I'm going to help you with that. Or, there is somebody trying to get into the room and interrupt the work. He would be the person to say, hey, can we get outside and talk? What's your, what do you need? So usually even in the seating arrangement, if you have a seating arrangement in the company, you would put a Scrum Master to sit next to the door. So he is the one who can close the door and still get out, So the team is typically 5 to 9 people. In ideal world, all the team members should be cross-functional. So they should be programmers, testers, GUI designers, user experience designers, anything you can think of. It's not, the real life, but, that's ideally. All the members should be full-time. That's, again, ideal preference. So you don't have people who are, oh, I'm a member, but, I'll come, when I come. So you want people, your team to be in a position that they can rely on a team member. Again, the repetition teams are self-organizing, and The membership of the team does not change only between sprints, but even that is not recommended. So if you can keep your teams, moving forward, that's the preferable, option. As far as the meeting go, is that before every sprint, you have to do the sprint planning. And sprint planning is probably the most complicated out of all, because there are a lot of things happening there. You have to consider your team capacity. You have to consider the list of features or backlog, things that you need to work on. You have to verify or check your business conditions. Has anything changed between now and previous sprint? You have to take into account the current product that you are improving and then technology that's available. So there are two main things in the sprint planning. One is kind of analyzing the product backlog, changing priorities, organizing. Product owner talks to the whole team, Scrum Master and everybody, and they say, okay, we think we can do these things out of your backlog. And that's what the sprint goal is. So that's the first outcome. The next outcome is the sprint planning, which takes a little bit longer time, is when they decide how to achieve all these goals, and basically they are breaking down these features into the tasks. And tasks get these hours assigned to them, which means like there should be some estimate of the time associated with each task. Once they do that, they can figure out that maybe they took too much or maybe they took too little. Usually you want to leave some reserve so that when new things arise, you can have some reserve time for that. This is just an example how one of the user stories can be broken down. So basically, there is I guess we can envision website for placing reservations for hotels. So there is a user story saying, as a vacation planner, I want to see photos of the hotels. So on the sprint planning meeting, that could kind of result in something like code the middle tier, code the user interface, write text fixtures, make this class, update performance tests and things like that. As the team goes through the sprint, they have to perform these daily Scrum meetings, which need to be very short. Typically, this can be done in the morning. The good tool for this is a coffee machine or coffee maker. So you want your people to come there, get their coffee or whatever they're getting. You would like them to stand up, so nobody is sitting. It's not that, the intention is that we don't have a meeting that's going to last long. You just want a very short and brief report. And this is only for the members, for the team members basically, to exchange the information and update each other on where they are. So 3 questions that you can think of that is, what did you do yesterday, what will you do today, and is there anything in your way? So if I don't know, this group of people here would be my Scrum team, everybody can, and imagine that we are standing up, everybody just comes and says this, and it should be like 20 seconds, 30 seconds per person. So if we have like, I don't know, 9 or 7 people, that should kind of go pretty fast. So that's why the standing is, you don't want to encourage any technical discussions, any details, anything, because then everybody's losing time. If we just do this blitz, explanation of what's going on, it's very helpful. The very important thing here is also that this is a commitment, in front of the peers. So basically, if you have one person that keeps saying that he's working on that database scheme, or whatever, and it repeats that, he or she repeats that for like 10 days and there is no results, then something's wrong. At the end of the sprint, team presents what's being accomplished. What's important here is that it should be a demo of new features. So here we don't want to have any PowerPoint slides. We don't want to have anything fancy. Just show me what you have done. The preparation for sprint reviews should be not longer than 2 hours. Product owners should be very well aware of what's going on. Things should be in acceptance phase, if not already accepted. And the idea is that on these, sprint review meetings, you invite your clients, you invite your user, you can invite anybody, because this is how the team gets the feedback from the outer world. In addition to the sprint review, there is a very short meeting that should be sprint retrospective. And the idea is that the team and maybe even other people involved in the project just go over things and say what we can maybe improve or what we shouldn't be doing. So one way to do these things is this start, stop, continue approach, when you just say we should start doing this. For example, I don't know, we have version control, but we don't have a continuous integration. Maybe we should start doing it. We should stop doing certain things, or we should continue doing what we are doing. The artifacts, we mentioned the backlog or the list of requirements. That's the main responsibility of the product owner, but team, he has to do it together with the team. There is a list of desired work on the product or project. Ideally, you want to express these items or features in a way that the emphasis is on value. That's where these user stories are very, very useful. After every sprint, you go through and adjust priorities. So one example or sample here is usage of user stories says, allow guests to make reservation. As a guest, I want to cancel a reservation. As a guest, I want to change the dates of reservation. As a hotel employee, I want to run revenue per available room, and etc. These are also very useful when you are responsible to communicate to the client, because they can understand this very well. The other benefit of this approach with user stories is that they are just conversation piece. So when you are implementing this, you don't necessarily need to know all the details. You just know that when time comes to implement these things, we need to talk about details. On the right side in the product backlog is the estimate. Estimate is kind of like a relative number. That's what it should be. But you want to associate a weight with each feature that you are working on so that you can do some judgment what's doable. Some people use days or man days for that. Some people use different things. I put pounds down there, which is probably not a good idea. But the thing is that people are very bad with doing estimates in absolute values. So 5 or 3 days, that's going to work good. But if you go to the 15 or 17 days, that's not going to, it's worthless. So there are ways how estimates are done. But I just wanted to point out to remember that we're talking about relative things. So if I ask you how tall is the building outside, you're not going to tell me it's 100 feet or 30 feet, because probably nobody will know. But if I ask you, is this building 2 times taller than the other building, you can do a pretty good job on that. So if you have a 10 or 15 or whatever numbers of these features you want to do, you come up with something that you feel like it's in the middle. You can put some number to it that you can kind of justify these other, adjust these other numbers relatively to that one. Once the items from the sprint backlog, from the product backlog are selected for the sprint goal, we are trying to put them in a sprint goal or theme. These are just some examples. Make this application run on different database engine, or make this website open nicely on mobile devices. And that just kind of that whole team has an idea what's happening in the current sprint. The bottom example is something that I've seen too often happening. So what's the sprint goal or sprint theme? Bug fixing. Guys that are doing sprint, any experiences with that? Okay. That's good. That's good. In ideal world, you don't want to have that almost never. So bug fixing, it's ongoing activity, meaning like whenever you find a bug, depending on severity and all that, it can become a part of the backlog. So that can be an item that goes into a sprint. But you typically don't want to have sprints when you say, or sometimes they call it stabilization, phase. That's usually a bad sign, meaning like that whatever we are doing in this previous iteration was not potentially shippable product, or we were accumulating what's called technical debt. So that bug fixing is done within a sprint. Typically, that's the design. That is the idea. So let's say if we are, starting with a website that has 5. You've done a full cycle of testing already. Exactly, integration, testing, and everything. And one interesting thing that also kind of people tend to evade, following, is that they kind of do it 90%, and then they say, okay, let's just accept it. and then you have this thing that's very common in software engineering projects, is that 90% of the time, 90% of the features of the softwares are 90% done, which pretty much means nothing is done. But basically, that is the ideal world. So even if you get to that 90% and you hit the end of the sprint, you don't call it failure, but you do not accept that work. And that means is that it goes back to the product backlog, but your assessment or estimate is not going to be, let's say, 10 days, or whatever. It's going to be, I need only 1 day. But you kind of remove that from this list of accepted things so that you have a very clean slate when you get into the next stage. So that's ideal world. Unfortunately, we never live in an ideal world. You even have situations that you are under big pressure that you have to deliver something, so you accumulate this technical debt. Or it's very common that you start doing this thing with a product that's been in development for a year or so, so you already have some technical debt. So bug fixing, or just getting it to the level of what you now consider done, and it's not there, so that's a tricky part. I mentioned that it's important, especially when you're hiring somebody and have outsourcing. That's really, really, really bad sign. So if they are doing this bug fixing, or stabilization iterations too many times, then you know that they are not doing the job right. Sprint backlog is a little bit different than the product backlog because things are broken down into tasks. So this here on the left side could be only maybe one user story or one feature. We have several tasks. It's also interesting that, as you see here, we started with, 5 tasks, and then on Wednesday, suddenly there is a new task here, add error logging. So that means that in the sprint, time frame, things do pop up. You discover new things, and some of the things that you planned 16 hours, you actually finished in 8 hours, but very often you have things that you didn't plan for. Burn down charts, this is just one example. This is a way of visualizing the progress throughout the sprint. Actually, there are 2 levels of burn down or burn up charts. Is that burn up are going up, burn down going down. But the 2 levels are you can have a burn down chart for the whole project, meaning like that you can show you have a backlog, all the features you want to implement. You put some estimates that I use pounds on it, so you can kind of show how many pounds or man days or whatever you made each sprint, so your manager can see that you're moving down towards 0, which means you'll be finished. The same thing happens here with the sprint burn down chart. This one is a little bit more important, because it allows team also to monitor where they are with the current, commitment that they made. But every time they discover something new, this burn down chart goes up, or they are not making progress, it kind of stays horizontal, or if they're making progress, it goes down. Another way to visualize progress is to use these task boards, and there are various other ways. But you can keep your items from the backlog, on the left, and then you can keep the tasks using post-it notes in the to-do, column, and then show the ones that are being done. In this case, we could say maybe that the different colors mean different people, taking the certain tasks, and then as they move to testing or finishing, the little post-it stickers move to the right. Towards the end or at the end of the sprint, all of these little stickers should be grouped in the right-hand column. Again, I put this finish done here and I just want to throw some terminology at you, but it's very important regardless of Scrum or any other software development. In Scrum, there is something that's called definition of done, which means that the team internally has to define what done means. The first rule is that done means done. Okay, so if it's done, that's what you asked. Everything has to be done. Integration, testing, acceptance, everything. But on the other hand, different level of application. If you're making a website that's not, critical to anybody's health or anything, that may have a different definition of done than if you are doing, some embedded development for the life support, application. So this means that this is more like an internal policy of the team, what they need to do when they're doing that work. So that a team can kind of self-organize, but also kind of self-judge if, one person or another is really following these policies. Quick look at these user stories is the main template, or most popular, I would say, is that template that goes like, as a role, I want to do certain things so that I create certain value. That's the most complete, one and very often used. And that means in one sentence you capture the feature of your software product. Again, some of these user stories end up being what they call them epics, meaning like you capture some big features. You say, oh, we need to have a data management system. So that would be an epic story. And then you break down that user story into, stories that could be, as a user, I want to be, able to upload photos, or I want to be able to upload any file, or I want to be able to edit file. So that would be what the features, of that data management system is. There are other formats there, so some, kind of putting the value or benefit first and then role. But anytime you want to kind of capture requirements, you want to identify these roles and sometimes called actors or users, and then you use that with what he or she wants to do, and then specify the value. Why is that really needed? This value part is very important when you're talking to customer or when you're trying to put priorities to it. These are typically written on these index cards traditionally. So the reason for that is you want to make it short. You don't want to make a user story that's going to be a full paragraph or anything. Of course, a lot of people don't like to use these. So there is tons of software that actually allows management of user stories and software requirements, or even Scrum process, online or offline. So that's available. But to make it really complete, if you look at the last bullets here, ready, there is a new term in Scrum that's also important to mention. I mentioned definition of done. That's definition of ready. So besides the user story, what you want to have is also, if you're looking at this index card, you want to be able to flip it over and then put maybe 3 or 4 bullets, which would be your criteria of satisfaction or acceptance criteria. And in addition to that, if you need GUI screens, designs, or you have some standard that needs to be utilized when you are doing something, you kind of attach all these things to this card, and that's your requirement. So that's a job for product owner and team together. But in order for you to go into sprint planning, you want them to be kind of in that ready state for the implementation. Another thing that I'm not listing here is to call them ready, you have to have a certain level of granularity for these user stories so that they are at the level that the team can really start talking about them. So to go back to that example of the document management system, if I just put a user story in front of the team and say, okay, guys, implement the document management system, we would go nowhere, So we either need to talk, or I will talk to the client and then maybe itemize what they mean by that, and maybe come back to you guys and say, I really have like 15 user stories, and each of these, in my opinion, can be done within 1 or 2, sprints. Can you help me out, do the estimate of the work? So one more look at the whole thing is that we have the requirements. We were using user stories as an example here. The whole team, do the sprint planning. Product owner is responsible for managing the product backlog. They pick up or commit to what they think they can do in a sprint. That's broken down into tasks. The whole team engages to working on these tasks. They meet daily next to the coffee machine or soda machine. At the end of the sprint, they communicate with product owner all the time, and at the end of the sprint, they deliver something that's actually shippable, potentially, It's a working increment of the software. So it's not something, oh, we've done it 90%, so we're going to do it whenever, So it has to be done. Some list of tools, index cards, post-it stickers, boards, corkboard, stapler, coffee maker, smartphone. Smartphone is a very useful tool, actually. You know, you can use these whiteboards, and once you kind of get something on it, the discussion was successful, you can take a picture and then use it as an attachment to a user story. On the right side, I just put some. These are like software tools, online tools. RallyDev is one that I used a lot. ScrumDo is a very decent one. AccuNote, CollabNet has some software. I don't know if I'm going to, exaggerate, but I think there might be hundreds of these online. So just do Scrum play, tools you'll find. Very useful tools can be these generic online collaboration tools like Google Docs and Spreadsheet, can be used very nicely for managing backlog and communicating with people, especially if they're not in the same place. But it's kind of allows a lot of room for creativity. One question that's kind of also often is how do we start that? And again, there is no like straightforward answer to that, but for new projects, you typically have to do a little project before the project, which means like you have to identify main user or main user roles. You have to identify main feature, at least what you think are main features. Before you really start doing something, you should kind of be at 80%, at least on this epic level. You need to know what are the main features of your software. And that's also part typically of some vision or feasibility studies. So even if you're negotiating a contract, you would do that anyways before you kind of get to the point to understand what's being done. On the existing product, there is always a question, is there a backlog? I mean, is there a good requirements document that's in sync with what you have? Is there technical depth? That's what we were talking about earlier. So if we are looking at existing product, I mean, do we have more bugs than features we want to add to it? For this existing project, I typically say create enough to get you going. So if you can create a backlog that gives your team, let's say, enough material to work in next 2, 3, 4 sprints, that may be sufficient to get you going. And then product owner can continue working on the backlog as they are working on the implementation. Few things on scalability. We mentioned that the typical team is up to 9 people. So the scalability comes in from team, doing teams of teams or scrum of scrums. It really depends on various things, but the idea is that you can pick representatives of, let's say we have 3 teams and pick representatives from these 3 teams, and then basically the top level group is doing their scrums and the bottom level is doing the actual implementation. One example that I'm going to paraphrase Mike Hong here on one of these courses, he would be using a Microsoft Office, analogy or Office analogy, and said, we have a spreadsheet, we have a Word, or we have a, what's that other one, PowerPoint, and then Access, which is not here because you don't need a team for that. And you can have top managers doing their Scrum, and then they would do the Scrums with their individual teams. Then you can do Scrum of Scrums. This is more like to whet your appetite or, say it can be done and it's been done. There is a reading list. Again, I recommend Mike Hone if you haven't read anything. Very good website is scrumalliance.org, which has a lot of reading material that you can download from there. There are other websites. One of good one is Mountain Goat Software. There is a Yahoo group and these usual suspects, Wikipedia, Google. YouTube is actually really good. I mean, there are a lot of presentations or videos on Scrum on YouTube. I found it very useful. And Amazon is always useful to kind of read comments on what people think about books. I have to say that these slides are made based largely on the presentation, that's distributable presentation on Scrum Alliance, made by Mike Hone. This is my contact information. I suggest LinkedIn if anybody wants to kind of contact. That might be the best way. I'm here locally in town in College Station, so I work with university and one local software company. So, any questions or any suggestions? Well, that depends, I guess. I mean, I have no right answer to that. It really depends if you are doing, like, let's say it could be internal development that you develop with your own team and you want to kind of make that call, oh, it's our software, we are releasing it or not. Another situation is when you are dealing with a client, you know, so meaning like somebody who is representing the users or they're paying your company to develop that software. Typically in that case, you know, you would have them together with you in that decision. So they would be a part of not just sprint review, but maybe also analysis is it good enough or not. One thing that this basic Scrum definition is not saying, but is almost being considered to be added to the process itself, is something that's called release planning. So initially, could be part of that project before project, but it could be the sense of we want to identify all the features that we have to have in order to release something. And that would then answer that question, okay, if we don't have all these features, we are not going to release it. The other part of that equation would be that definition of done. So, okay, we think we have all the features there, but are they really done? So, you know, that would be another. So if you kind of match these two things, you're ready to release it. I don't know if that helps you or not. Yes?
One of your opening slides was the types of projects that Scrum has been applied to. Is there types of projects that it's less well suited for?
I'm not aware of that. Because you see, this is like a framework how you organize yourself and your team to work. It can actually even be used in a one team of one person. I mean, you can use it, you know, if you want to do it. What's really good about it is that it gives you some basic rules how to put yourself in that mode of making sure that you're making progress in these predefined time slots. The other thing that's kind of really beneficial of Scrum being used in anything is that it usually exposes all the problems that you have as a company or group or whatever. So it's not always a solution. So I'm not saying it's going to solve. You know, we are doing Scrum, everything is, you know, great. But it's actually going to expose. So if you have technical debt in your software and you want to kind of work on it, that's going to be exposed because you're asking this guy to add printing to your software, but your software is crashing, you know, every now and then for some other reason. So you ask him to add printing and, you know, do integration and demonstrate that printing works, and that software, you know, crashes 3 times in the meantime, but it was crashing 3 times even before printing, you know. So these are the things that kind of are good, but I don't have an answer to say, you know, maybe this different process. No, I think it's a really good process. It could be applied to a lot of things, you know. Challenges do come, you know. Challenges are when you're trying to do scaling, when you have, you know, Scrum of Scrums. Challenges are when you're doing outsourcing, so you have product owner who is here or client who is here and team who is over there. But we have to kind of cope with challenges. That's what it is. Any other questions? Feel free to, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. My name is Tomo Popovic. So let me go to the first slide. That might help. Any more comments, questions? I would like really to hear from you guys, you know, that are using it. You know, how long have you been using it, and, you know, goods and bads? That would 20 months. 20 months? Okay.
One of them was, you know, it was, I guess, convenient during a down period, I would say, it was prior to going abroad in one context, if you will, and also like heavy vacation time.
Okay.
Folks weren't around, so we just kind of took it as an opportunity to clean up, vigilance. We were constantly dropping bugs into iterations. We prioritize one.
Okay.
Really say this one needs attention, and we're going to work on it.
I understand. Exactly.
One of my questions, I guess some of the questions I noticed you for this slide there is you don't change the iteration.
Okay.
Due to the nature of the project we're working on,
Okay.
That being said, we don't just keep trying. We know it's not going to happen.
Okay.
Pull it out and pull in another story.
Yeah.
So
I think that's okay.
okay,
I mean,
I didn't know how to interpret your slide if it does not change.
well,
Obviously, you don't want a lot of volatility.
there is another.
Question?
The question was about the slide that's saying that throughout the iteration you do not change, you do not any changes. You let theme, be alone. But the thing is, he mentioned there are examples in their experience that they early in the sprint they realize there is too much work. Something's not going to happen, so they kind of drop one of the features and put something else in. Sometimes you drop feature and you don't put anything in. I mean that's. There is an different way of doing it, but it's more like what teams prefer to do. As you go forward, and you've done like how long is your iteration? Is it 2 weeks or 2 weeks? So you've done a lot, so you have a lot of experience. Yeah, one thing that you can do is actually not take as much. So kind of plan for this room for unexpected events or maybe incorrect estimates or things like that. And if everything goes smoothly, okay, we can take something in. But, sometimes, people are people, so they can actually take advantage of that and say, oh, man, I finished this whole thing in 1 week. So it's a smooth sail, the second week I'm just going to pretend I work, And so being a little bit aggressive, it's not a bad idea. I mean, you go it, and if there is no, like, conflict situation, I think it's perfect. You kind of don't want it to be. The main thing I would be worried about if it creates some kind of negative, attitude. You see what I'm saying? If it's like everybody gets kind of mad or feels like underachievers or something, then that's not good. But if it's kind of like a common thing, it's honest and open discussion, and we really cannot do this, or we just realize this thing is not 5 user points, it's story points, it's 15, we have to give up, so that's good.
In the case of software development, do you find product managers that have development experience are better, or let's just say they're bean counters, do they have any business being a project manager for a software development project? Can they learn to write effective stories? And that's really where the question is. Most of our challenge early on was related to the quality of the stories being written.
Let me give you an example. I mean, I've been working like for 7, 8 months on a project as a consultant when it was a medical health record software. And the guy is a doctor who is, paying to develop this software, and there is an overseas team. That was that same team I was mentioning before. And they put him to be a product owner for the development process. They actually did a really good job. I mean, they developed a lot of things, and I got to meet this guy, and he's extremely smart, extremely versatile with computers and all that. But he had hard time to actually put himself into that mode of I need to follow the process. So he would be occasionally actually the cause of let's break it, let's do something, And what we did, one of the first things is we took a person over there who was in charge of the. Actually, he was a Scrum Master at the time, but I said he would be a good candidate because he has enough now of domain knowledge because he worked with you over a year to be a product owner. So he would be the channel to talk to you about the requirements, but it's his responsibility to write those user stories in a way that the IT people working for him can relate to. Exactly. So he was in charge to make sure that he understands everything, and this guy would be looking at user stories, acceptance criteria. They had a designer to do all the screens, and everything. So that would all be in the Rally Dev, specifying what's going on. But then they assigned another guy to be Scrum Master. Actually had 2 teams, so they had 2 Scrum Masters, and 2 teams. But it actually went much better, that way. Because, whenever they got a user story or something, it was, something they could relate. They could understand where this fits into the product, where it fits into the, So that would be one way of. But that's why I said the product owner role is the weirdest one. Because sometimes if you have a client or customer who can delegate somebody like that, that's ideal world. But it's usually not like that. So you sometimes want to have a person in your team that can take that role and take a responsibility of talking to a client or customer and translate it in a still English language, but in a form that, helping developers, get more value from the descriptions. Any more comments? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.